It's day 93 of the COVID-19 lockdown in South Africa. And when we come back, join us for a catch-up conversation and do say hello in the comments. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. Happy Friday from a very cold, wintry Cape Town in South Africa. If you haven't met me before, my name is Brijetti Limbanda. It's day 93 of the COVID-19 lockdown in South Africa. And we've had some amazing guests on the show of late. And we've got some new COVID-19 updates. And so we're basically doing a recap. But first of all, hello to my amazing co-host, Viola Manuel. Viola, how are you today?
Good, Brigitte. Just as you mentioned, it's freezing. It's cold in Cape Town. We Cape Townians are such, at least I think I'm such a wimp. Just a little bit of a drop in temperature, and I'm like ready to surrender. It's so cold. So yeah, it's winter. It's that time of the year, and it's of course almost like we've been under lockdown for 3 months now, and we should all be quite used to it. I think lots of people have gone through that stage of also just having cabin fever and going a bit crazy. I think we've all just sort of settled now. So it's that time. It's that time.
Absolutely. I must say, with this cold, wintry weather, I'm kind of like want to just push that button and say, beam me up, Scotty, to some warmer
Yes,
weather.
yes. So, take a trip, but we're not allowed. We're not allowed to take a trip yet. So we're still with level 3, and the only travel that's allowed now is cross-border travel, of course, and provincial borders, and that's also only because of you have to have your permits and your letters and everything stating that you're on business. Accommodation in other cities, if you have to use accommodation, you can only use accommodation if you're actually on business. So it's business travel, no leisure travel. I thought it was so strange with the new regulations. You could self-drive around the province, but you're not allowed to stay over. So make sure you have enough fuel to get back.
I'd like to see anyone that's prepared to embark on that journey right now. That would be extremely interesting if somebody
Yes.
decided to hop in their car, knowing that they cannot stay over anywhere.
Yeah.
And considering we're about to peak, which is the other interesting thing.
Yeah. So it's a as we understand, the Western Cape is busy going through that process now, and I'm not quite sure what the indicators are, but I know that the peak has been something that's sort of been predicted using computer programs and just analyzing data. So as I understand, we actually have started our peak already. So everybody's super cautious. Every time you speak to anybody, they're talking about it's peaking. And be careful. Like sort of no indication, like there's no blue sky or purple sky or anything like that indicates it. It's really just sort of predictions based on the data that they've got. So yeah, we at a very dangerous time. I must say, however, it is getting much closer to home. Hearing a lot more about people who are infected that are maybe 1 degree away from you. So
Away from you. I know, initially there was a lot of talk around social media with COVID-19 possibly being a hoax. And, I'm not taking this seriously because no one I personally know of has had COVID.
Correct.
This is a manufactured thing, but it's changing very quickly because now it's people that we know, people within our circle. I've had, heard conversations from medics as well, where there's a concern because they're seeing a lot of their colleagues be testing positive. And I think, the concern for us in South Africa is that unlike other countries, we don't have as many medics to spare or available. And so it is a huge concern that more and more of them are testing positive. But on the bright side, we've had almost 60,000. In fact, to be precise, we've had 59,974 recoveries.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And that's been really interesting, because it means that, the recovery rate, we always seem to focus on sort of the death rate. And I know there's about over 2,200 people that have died, 2,200 families that are radically affected, who will never forget this pandemic because they've
yeah.
lost a loved one. But there are many, many recoveries, and lots of people talking and sharing their stories. And what's interesting to me, Brigitte, is that everybody's symptoms seem to be so different, and everybody's experience of going through those 14 days of quarantine is very different. Some people, headaches, nausea, the whole tutti, and other people are saying, we were told we're positive, but I can't really see any specific symptoms. So yeah, it's an interesting space to be in at the moment. Lots of families, I'm finding out that lots of sort of husband and wife both are infected. So lots of lockdowns and shutdowns for families as
And
well.
it's a difficult situation, especially if there are children involved, because you
Yes,
do want to make sure that your children are kept safe, and especially
yeah,
if they have underlying conditions. And so,
correct.
what do you do in a situation where mom and dad test positive and children are negative?
Yeah, yeah,
You
and
know,
and also it's not like a quick 3 day or 4 day quarantine. It's 14 days. It's a substantial amount of time. Especially for kids not to interact with their parents. So it's especially if you're not a mom and dad that travels. The kids aren't used to not having you around, and suddenly for 14 days there's no contact. So it's very traumatic. And scary for our kids. But the recovery rate has been amazing. Our frontline staff are doing amazing. And I think you and I have acknowledged that the frontline staff, not just healthcare workers, frontline staff in stores, everywhere else, everybody seems to still be able to smile. Everybody still seems to be able to have a little bit of a sense of humor, which South Africans are well known for. We resilient. So it's, just constantly hearing a lot more infections with our frontline workers, but they've still been able to do their jobs, and that's been good.
oh, absolutely. And then, of course, a few of the other sectors of the economy has opened up, and I've got a bit of an infographic here. So let's just put that infographic on screen for a moment to share what's happening. So exercise has been a huge
Yeah,
topic for conversation, with
yeah.
lots of people saying we can do this and it makes no sense. And so now you can actually go and exercise from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with groups of 4 people.
Yes, so lots of people sort of have exercise clubs and exercise buddies, just to keep them motivated. So the idea of doing a 5K walk or a 10K run on your own isn't as great as the idea of actually being able to do this. It's fantastic. So I think the opportunity to just exercise together, as I understand, social distancing is still expected, your masks are still expected, but you can at least sort of have somebody next to you motivating you to move on, and finish that 10K run or that
Yeah,
20K run. And I
yeah.
think that makes a huge difference.
Oh,
And of course, it's from
absolutely.
6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That people are now allowed to exercise.
And then, of course, I think, for the cinemas opening, it's a difficult one. I mean, they've come out of a period where they weren't able to open for 3 months,
Yeah.
and now your cinemas may only open with 50 people or less. How
Yeah,
how economically viable is it to open up with 50 people or less, and how do you control that? you
and
know
also I think another big concern, Brigitte, is that the entrances to the actual cinema is quite narrow, and it's dark, and so people touch surfaces to just try and get to their seat, and that's what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid
that's
that.
going to be an interesting one. That's going to be
Yeah.
very interesting, where the
Yes.
cinemas actually open up, and and how they're going to, because what do? You've only got 50 people allowed, but you
Yeah,
don't know if somebody sneezed while they were in there. So,
absolutely.
you're going to have to clean that entire cinema after a session
Yeah,
of only 50 people.
yeah. Yeah, and so you have to actually the whole thing has got to be sanitized. So, in terms of the shows that you do have, and cleaning up and all of that. But the same thing could be said for this whole theater casino space, as well. I mean, they're opening up casinos, which to me is really, really strange. I think everybody has their own personal opinions on some of the vices, but we've already had a huge problem with them unbanning alcohol, and now people are really struggling financially, and now they're going to be opening casinos, um, and that it is a worrying factor.
That to me is one of the hugest concerns, because right now there's so many who can't put food on the table.
Correct.
It is what it is. People can't
Yeah.
put food on the table. And even people who are financially in a better position
Yeah.
are realizing that they need to be extremely careful with what they've got, because we don't know. We're dealing with so many unknowns. Their
Yeah.
businesses have also taken a massive hit. And
Yes.
so you run the risk now of people who are not thinking rationally, because that's another issue,
Yes.
that may be going off to the casino as a method of escape, and then possibly putting them into a more difficult situation, having spent money they couldn't afford to lose. So that's a
That's
consideration there as
that
well.
is a major concern, because the casino, look, doesn't matter how lucky you are, at some stage you lose, and it's something that deeply concerns me. I'm just not quite sure. I guess what I see as a trend under level 3, especially like sort of now, and these regulations, as I understand, only come in on the 29th of um, 29th of June, and of course, subject to the fact that all these entities have got to meet the hygiene and safety protocols and
Right,
guidelines. But
right.
my biggest concern around, some you can see that government is sort of trying to open up spaces where people can, sort of be entertained, and we can get back to sort of social interactions and so on. But it's still going to be with the social distancing. It's still going to require for you to wear a mask. And I don't know how ready people are for cinemas, theaters, casinos, cultural, spaces. I mean, if I think about myself, I'm not sure I would go into any of those places right now, because there's no vaccine. Testing is still a challenge. I don't know if I would go into any of those places right now. And so you are asking these businesses to open, but you can't guarantee that they're going to have a market.
Absolutely. So they're going to have to put staff there. They're going to have to pay for sanitization.
Yes.
It's and these places have been closed for such a long time, so
Correct.
it's an expense, a huge expense to open. They're going to have sanitizers clean as people come in
Yes.
and out more often, making sure that the bathrooms are kept in a sanitary condition.
Yeah.
It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what happens, but more interesting is also the fact that the personal care industry is now open up, and I think that's been one of the biggest debates we've had for the last 3 months, was the
Yeah.
personal care. I mean, if you've ever had interesting conversation, then it's been around the personal care industry.
Yeah. Look, I'm doing a loud and proud hallelujah. There's just some things that need to be taken care of under the personal care banner. But it is still a concern. It's still a concern. I mean, it's fantastic. It's been interesting, because you really just realize how vain, like I've just had to realize how vain I actually am, because, you're like worried about the fact that you can't color your hair, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, unless you're able to do it yourself, but lots of people aren't able to do it themselves. So my biggest concern around the personal care industry is that, first of all, they're going to have to abide by all the rules and regulations. So I don't quite know how they're going to cope with all of that, because personal care is in your personal space. It's
Well,
it's right in your space. And how do you cut somebody's hair with a mask on?
the most interesting thing for me here under the personal care industry now, nail technicians are used to sort of working under
Yes.
sanitary conditions. And I know that the hairdressing industry, for example, that they've opened up internationally already, way
Yeah.
before we have done so, and they seem to have managed that quite successfully. They put the checks and balances in place. They do not allow people to come in with the person who's got the appointment. You've got to.
Yeah.
I see people require you to be strictly on time, or
Mm.
you forfeit the appointment. And I think some of them charge you if you don't pitch up for your appointment or you're
Yeah.
late for your appointment, because they're now needing to run strictly according to schedule, so that at no point there are people sitting in the waiting room.
Yes.
Um, Now, the other interesting thing there that I'd like to see the development on is that some of the hairdressing salons are charging you an additional fee for PPE. So it's going to be interesting to
Correct.
see how that is going to be handled, whether they're going to
Absolutely.
get away with that or not.
Absolutely. I think this is going to become super interesting to see because, already people are, just it's an additional expense. Yes, you want to look good, you want to feel good, and of course, you know that there's that whole theory around, as soon as the economy tanks, more people buy more women buy more lipstick, people buy more
Right.
lipstick. So there is that correlation, but I think in terms of this whole personal care space, there is still a concern around your health, and there is still a concern around the risk. And
Well,
I just don't know. I just don't know if South Africans are disciplined enough to actually just sort of like be on time or forfeit an appointment. It's very much sort of like your doctor's appointment now, the appointment with your dentist. You're gonna have to take your hairdresser and their time that they give you a lot more seriously, I guess.
right. And then the more interesting thing for me under the personal care um, industry is the fact that they're allowing tattoo parlors. Now, that to me is
Weird.
very strange, because I think your risk for infection is so much higher when it comes to tattoos.
Absolutely. I just, what I do think has happened is that these industries have canvassed and lobbied so smartly that they've gotten the attention of government. And I really think at this point now, it's about people's livelihoods and people just saying, you know what, we have to earn a living. And
Right.
so I think, and a lot of, in the personal care space, you sit with a lot of entrepreneurs who are breadwinners in their homes. So I
Correct.
do think it's all about that balance, Brigitte. I think it's all about that balance that we spoke about right at the beginning of the balance between, people's lives and their safety. And of course, just allowing them to earn a living. But I do think that I'm sure the hygiene protocols and guidelines for personal care is going to even be more extensive and more onerous than for anybody else. But I think I think it's a good thing. I think being able to allow these individuals to earn a living and to be able to open up. I think we're just going to have to be super careful. And I also understand that, even with all these changes to the regulations, Brigitte, people who are high risk are still encouraged to not participate.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
As far as auctions are concerned, agriculture, I think there's a lot of sense in that.
Yes,
Our food,
absolutely.
our food value chain has got to continue. And I
Absolutely.
don't, I don't think there's any particular aspect of auctions that could possibly be high risk, because you can, with the auctions, you can always call in your bid. You don't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
be there in person. So I think they're sort of pretty much in the clear. And then the
Yeah.
other big thing is going to be restaurants that'll be opening up.
Again, another strong hallelujah from me. Eh?
I would love to see, how many restaurants are going to be fully booked out. But again, there's going to be, regulations that they will have to adhere to. So that's going to
Yeah.
be an interesting one. For me personally, I have a little bit of an issue about the no consumption of alcohol on sites on restaurants, because I don't personally, that's my personal view. I don't see any issue with that. I don't think that is where the alcohol abuse takes place.
Yes.
And it'd be interesting to see what the restaurant owners come up with in that regard,
Yeah.
because generally people that consume alcohol in a restaurant do so in a responsible manner. They're having it with their dinner.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely, and of course it's like with the airlines. You can control it. It's with you can sort of say to people, look, you've had enough, or there can sort of be a restriction in terms of the amount of alcohol consumed. I know a lot of restaurants are subscribed to a sort of responsible drinking policy. So if you get
right.
sloshed, you are not allowed to drive. They call you an Uber, etc., etc. And I agree with you. I don't know if this is where the abuse of alcohol actually takes place. But I almost have a sense that government realized that they shouldn't have lifted the alcohol ban, but it's too late to go back. And so they're just trying to sort of cut it wherever they can. So that's my sense on it. But again, I agree with you. I don't think that this is where that abuse of alcohol actually takes place. But I think the enhanced regulations are going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how people respond to it. It's going to be interesting to walk around in malls and see how full restaurants are going to be. But for those those people out there, people out there who are tired of eating the food at home, you're going to be looking for an opportunity to go out and go and have something to eat. I'm also concerned about restaurants and how they're going to cope, in terms of having a family of 5 come and sit down to eat. Restaurants aren't designed for social distancing. They're designed
No,
for socializing. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to actually make those spaces compliant. So yeah, it's going to we in for interesting times. I know that internationally these industries have opened up a while ago, and so I think it might be a good idea for restaurant owners to just try and get onto the horn with somebody from a restaurant owner in Europe or somewhere else and just find out how they've been doing it. I'm sure there's nuances for the South African guidelines, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I think, just the whole thing, that's what the Cappuccino Club's all about. It's about, giving people the opportunity to have conversations with people that they haven't had conversations with before. So if there are any questions that our viewers have, any comments our viewers would like to make, I'm sure it would be amazing to just engage with our viewers. And because we are an international, we have an international audience, it might be great to actually hook people up with each other, to just speak. If you're a restaurant owner, if you're a hairdresser, if you're a person who has to be in charge of a cinema and all of those good things, and you have questions around just how practical is it, maybe just speak to us and put some comments down, and we'll see how we can help you in terms of just hooking you up with other people who find themselves in a similar situation, who've already gone through the steep learning curves. So that's what we're looking to do at Cappuccino Club, is just get people to speak to each other, inspire change through conversations. We've had great guests over the
we
last few days.
have. We absolutely have,
Yeah, we've had some really good guests.
So one of the things that we discussed with Enver Mali when we're talking about the tourism industry, and I was thinking of that as we were going through the different sectors opening up. For example, he was saying when the flights open, it doesn't mean because the flights are available that people are going to fly.
Yeah,
And so likewise with all these industries opening up, it doesn't mean that someone's going to be rushing to get a tattoo just because the tattoo parlor is open. You
correct.
know,
Correct. So
I think people are going to apply common sense. A lot of people, especially now that we're peaking at the moment, I think people will think twice about engaging in activities that may be risky or may put their families at risk.
yeah, and then you sit and you think about the major financial investment that a lot of restaurant owners or personal care owners are going to put into
Correct.
into their business, to open their business, and nobody's going to come. So you really have to weigh it up. It's like what a lot of churches have done. Lots of churches have said, we're allowed to open, but should we
But we're
open?
not.
When do
Correct.
we open? And let's reassess it on a monthly basis. So I sort of suspect that a lot of business owners, maybe the bigger chains might not, but I think especially smaller restaurants, smaller hairdressers, they might sit back and say, look, do we open? Is it wise for us to open? I think that's the big discussion I think business owners are having at the moment. So we fought to have ourselves open. Now we have to look at the actual buyer behavior. Are people going to come in and buy our services and products?
Absolutely. And of course, there's also the expense of advertising. to let people know that you are open and what your regulations are, and then abiding by the government
Correct.
regulations that are in place. So it's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Before we close, maybe we could just take a few minutes and talk about what the Cappuccino Club is all about, because we haven't
Yeah.
done that in a little while.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
anyone watching that isn't familiar with the Cappuccino Club and why it was started, could we maybe just run through a
Yeah.
few
I think.
of those things?
Yeah, the Cappuccino Club has really been set up by a group of amazing women who sort of worked with me. It sort of started off as a social club, just getting together and having coffee and having a giggle. And then we realized that the amount of value in that room was just astonishing in terms of the business experience, the life experience, etc. So we put the Cappuccino Club together, and the main, I think, sort of function or main mandate of the Cappuccino Club is really about networking. It's really about letting people know you can work together, we can have conversations, we can help each other. And it really started with this whole idea that we were fighting against this notion that women couldn't work together and women couldn't help
Mm,
each other, you know. But I think that the ladies who are part of the Cappuccino Club now, and by extension, anybody who's part of the Cappuccino Club now or affiliated or involved with the Cappuccino Club, understands that it's about, sort of lifting while we rise, and it's about helping each other and just doing, I think just being there for each other. So when you see our WhatsApp group, it's amazing how women are just sharing information. And one of the things we're quite strict about is there's no sort of kittens with steaming cups of coffee with good morning stickers and all of those things. It's really about, just posting information that helps. So very, just in the comments, if anybody would like to be part of the Cappuccino Club, like to be added to the WhatsApp group, please feel free also to subscribe to any of the social media platforms so that you can get notifications on who will be on the show and what we will be discussing. Thank you to everybody who's engaged with us, commented, asked us for things. We will definitely, we've made our commitment to get you the information required. So I see lots of, it's so cool to sit on the show and just see names come up that you know quite well and know, okay, this, you sort of make the connection on how those individuals can be helped. But it's inspiring change to the conversation, inspiring positive change to the conversation. So thank you to our audience for being amazing and being so supportive of the Cappuccino Club. And of course to you, Brigitte, you put together the most amazing show. And so, like I said, I always love hanging out with you. You make me look amazing. You make me look clever. You make me look, what is the word you always say? My amazing co-host. It's got a lot to do with the work that you do. So thank you to everybody for making the show as amazing as we have. 93 days. We've been at it for almost a year. 92 days of lockdown. We've been able to come to you for most of those days. And so thank you to everybody who's been part of it.
I'd like to echo that as well. It's been an amazing community. We've had amazing guests on the show that we could never have imagined. They've given us shared tremendous value. And
Absolutely.
so a huge big thank you to them. And if you are one of the Cappuccino Club ladies and you'd like us to feature what you do on the show, then also please do reach out to us. And we've got a fantastic lineup for next week and also for the weeks to come. So please join us again. And I think that's a wrap for today. And
Yes.
from me, I want to wish each of you a fantastic weekend, safe
Have a
weekend.
Mm. Have a great weekend. Bundle up in blankets, as I understand it's going to be raining this weekend. So have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our viewers, and good night.
Good night, everyone.